Hello everyone and welcome to this Advanced Steel PowerPack tips and tricks session with me, Rob Merriman. What we'll do, for those of you new to Greytech, just do a quick introduction to Greytech and then we'll crack on with the PowerPack tips and tricks. Hello everyone and welcome to this Advanced Steel PowerPack tips and tricks session with me, Rob Merriman. What we'll do, for those of you new to Greytech, just do a quick introduction to Greytech and then we'll crack on with the PowerPack tips and tricks. Okay, now what we'll do, we'll crack straight into the tips and tricks. If anyone does have any questions on the particular bits I'm showing today, please just type them into the question box and I will do my best to answer them as we're going through the presentation. So, first thing we are going to look at is the platform cover and using it based on an area. So the platform cover and the floor cover macros will work based on beams or areas. Now most of the time people use the beam functions. The area option is what we're going to look at today, and that uses the cladding macro area, which is a standard part of Advanced Steel, but our PowerPack tool will use that. Now I'm showing this tip and trick today because this came in on a support case about a week ago, so thank you to Andy for letting me use his model for this particular tip and trick. Now the reason we use the area function is if our beams are overlapping and they're not sort of noding out, you'll see when we get to the demonstration that the macro falls over itself if the beams aren't positioned as it needs them, but we can still use the tool. We just use the area instead of beams. Okay, let's have a look at the PowerPack connection vault and we'll look at the platform cover. So what we'll do is we'll do it based on beams, and I want the cover to be based on these beams in here because we're just covering this area. Now it asks for a point inside the contour, so we'll use a nearest snap in there. And we get, if you look at the command line, we get operation aborted. Now the reason for that, if I isolate these beams, you can see that these beams aren't what we call noding out. You can see obviously these are extending through. When we set that macro to run based on beams, it's trying to find where all the system lines, or at least the beams, touch, and because these ones are running completely through, it's not going to work. So there is something else we can do with the platform cover tool. You'll see that we have, when we start the macro, we have the option for beams, we have the option for area. Now the area tool actually is looking for a cladding area that has been defined. So we can actually use the cladding area for our floor cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw in a rectangle of where I want my cladding area to be. So we'll try and use a parent intersection. Okay, we'll go to that point, and then we'll grab this and we'll move it back to a perpendicular point. So we'll bring it back. So we can use some snap overrides. So that's just a rectangle of where I want my flooring. Now, what we need to do, if you were creating cladding, we would need to define a cladding area. So I would say, okay, do I want to select supporting beams? I'm going to say no in this instance. Are we doing it based on a rectangular point or from a polyline? Because I've already drawn the rectangle, I can say from polyline. I'll just show you what I did there. I did a selection window, so let me start that again. I'll do from polyline. It's quite hard to actually select that polyline when we're in a realistic view. So what I can do is draw a window from left to right, which will select anything that crosses the box. And then I'm going to deselect. So to deselect, I push and hold the Shift key, and then click on the object I want to deselect. And that will leave me with just a polyline. It then says, okay, I've converted this polyline into a cladding area. Do you want to delete the original polyline? So I'll say yes, because otherwise it can get a bit tricky to actually select what we want to select. If I then select this, if I can, and we look at the AutoCAD properties, we can see that it's not a rectangle, it's an advanced steel cladding area. So if we go back to our platform cover tool, I can then say, okay, actually today I want it to be based on an area. I still get the option to split the cover, so I can say, yeah, I do want to split the cover, and I want to do it based on beams. So I can say it's these beams in here. And that will give me then the platform cover tool. So we can say, okay, we want to make this from gratings. Number one, the projection, that is from the area that we've drawn. So I want to say, no, I want it flush there. And then I can say, okay, we want a 20 mil gap where we've asked it to split. That area function is also available in the floor cover macro. So the floor cover tool is where we set the sizes of panels we want, and it just places them in there. We'll just quickly show that one in action. So I'll go floor cover based on an area. I'll say no on the reference point. Now in here, what we can do is I can say, okay, I want to make this from variable grating or plate or timber section, but I can say, okay, I want these to be 3 meters long, but all we have in stock is, say, some 700 wide sections, and maybe we want a gap of, say, 20 mil as well. And what that will do is that will model in 3 meter by 700 wide, and it will just place as many as it needs, and then we have a little offcut at the end. So platform cover, we choose our split points and it just models in what it needs to. Floor cover, we set the size that we want and it will just place them in. But both will work on an area if the beams option isn't available for you. Okay, so moving on to our next tip and trick, we're going to look at the PowerPack Joint MultiEdit. So we can edit similar joints that have different values within the joint itself. They must be the same joint type, so eaves, haunch to flange. We can't do a fin plate and a base plate at the same time. But if we had fin plates that had different settings in them, we can edit those joints at the same time. To access a tool, you do need to have the joint boxes showing. We'll give you a nice little tip on how to get the joint boxes showing. So the method you go through, select the joint boxes, right click, and then in the right click menu you'll see Greytech PowerPack Joint MultiEdit. It opens up the joint dialog box, and anything you change will change to everything else. Obviously stuff we don't edit will remain unchanged. So what we are going to do here, we are going to look at the connections between the column and the rafter. You can see in the right click menu it's grayed out there. Now what we need to do is we need to turn on the joint box for all of these haunch connections. So you select any item that the connection controls, go to the extended modeling tab, and there is a button there called display, and that will display the joint boxes. So you don't have to turn everything back on, you can just turn on selected joint boxes. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go and edit one of these joints so that we have 7 items that are the same but one is different. So we're just going to come in here and change the length and the height of this haunch. You can see it's a completely different size. But what we can do is we can select all of our joint boxes, right click, and we have PowerPack Joint MultiEdit. So although the values within the joints are different, it will actually let us edit these joints. And what we're going to do, we are going to add an additional rafter. In a second. So we're going to not add an additional rafter, subtract the additional rafter. We're going to turn that off, and you can see that has applied to all the joints. And we'll just come on and we'll put a couple of stiffeners in. Now you can see that's done that for all those connections, but the haunches where we had different sizes, it's left those as we set them. Obviously, if we did go and change them at this point, they would then all update to be the same. But we want to leave them to be different. So this is how we can edit different types of the same joint all at the same time. We thought we'd now highlight tokens that you can use within the camera creator. So with tokens, it can help to aid and automate the descriptions that we put into the camera. So we're not having to manually type in certain things. So you can see the camera creator there. We've got 4 tokens. We've got a counter, we've got a grid line, we've got a grid intersection, and we've got the camera level. Now, these are available in the camera creator, but once you've created your cameras, they are also available in the camera browser as well. And the counter token, we can set it to any value. So it can be numerical, it can be letters, we could start it at any value we want to start it at. So let's have a little look at this in action. Here we have our trusty advanced steel training model that we use in the UK. I'm sure everyone is very, very familiar with this model now. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the PowerPack tab. We are going to look at the camera creator. Now, we're going to focus on the token. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly look at setting up the style. So I can tick user, that'll take me direct to the user styles, and we'll use one of our Greytech customized ones. We've set the front and rear depth. I want a plan. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say plan at level. And this is where we're going to use the tokens. So the tokens have been created specifically for the camera creator. So I can say camera level. And what we can then do is I can place the camera. And I'll put a camera in here. I'll say place camera. I'll put one in at my mezzanine level. And I'll say place camera, and we'll put one in here. So that is my levels. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, I want a front view, and this time we're going to say elevation on grid, and rather than me typing in the grid each time, I'm going to use the grid line token. And again, place camera. Now as long as you're placing your camera directly on a grid line, it will work as expected. We'll say place camera. You could use the grid intersect, snap override, place camera. So if you're not used to snap overrides, push and hold the shift key, do a right click. There is an advanced deal specific one called grid intersect. We're also going to do some connections. And this time I'm actually just going to use the counter. But you'll see in the top right here, my counter is already set to number 7 because it's been ticking up. I'm actually going to override this value to use a letter. So we're going to say, it should then say connection A, B, C, D. And we're going to create a meter box basically. And in my GradeTech UK custom styles, I've got a style for enlarge details that show hidden lines or enlarge details that don't. So we'll use that one there. And we'll say place camera, and what we'll do, we'll just put some in around here. So we'll put one in there. Now this time I want to do a left view. So I'm going to say place camera there. And we'll come in and we'll put one in. Now I can see my view cube here is set to right, so I can change it to right. I probably want to tweak the depth a little bit. What we'll do, we'll put it in. The depth is probably showing a bit too much there. And the final one that we can use is our grid intersection. So we could say detail at grid. Got my caps locks on. And this time I could choose grid intersection. So we could say, okay, let's have a look at what grid intersection we're going to do. Okay, we'll just do this one in here. So we want to go back to a front view, place the camera, use our grid intersection snap, and that'll put our cameras in. Now, to show you what it's done, if we start with our levels, if I double click on this camera, we've got plan at level 0, 0. Now, you don't need to click on each camera to see what it wants to do. We can actually use the PowerPack camera browser. So if we open the camera browser, here are my plans. So I've got plan at 0, 0, plan at 3 meters. If you want to find where that camera is, just double click on it and it will take you to where that camera is in the model, and it will actually select it for you. We can see that our elevations are filled in, my connections are A, B, C, D, my detail here, that the last camera I added in, that is on grid B3, so we've got B in there, and we've got grid 3 here. So we can use those tokens to automatically fill in our camera description, and we can use the camera browser to check that. The final thing with the camera browser, the last connection I put in, those values are too big, my front and rear depth, so I can actually set them and change them in here. My last little tip is you have to make sure you hit the apply button. So hit the apply button, and there our camera has updated itself via the camera browser. So next we're going to look at how to add special parts. There are certain macros within the PowerPack that use special parts, predominantly stairs and railings, and it is possible for us to add our own special parts to these macros. So any of the PowerPack tools that use a special part, we can add our own special parts in, and this is done via the special part manager. You can see it there on the PowerPack ribbon. Now, my advice would be to, if you're not sure about when you're creating your special part, if you're not sure how it needs to be orientated, open up an existing one that the PowerPack is already using and just check to see what that, how that is set up. It is critical we get the orientation of the special part correct relative to the world coordinate system of that special part file. All your special parts are stored in your program data file, Autodesk, Advanced Steel. Now the XXX there denotes the version, so I'm going to show you 2024 today, and then the next XXX is your build number, so I'm using the GBR, the UK build. Let's have a look at some special parts then. So I'm in my Advanced Steel, I'm going to go to the PowerPack tab, and I'm going to load the special part manager. So this is where we manage and we can add new special parts. And today we're going to be looking at the pipe-to-pipe connection. Now, what I would advise, if you're not sure about the orientation of the special part or how it needs to be set up and positioned, have a look through the special part manager. We can see the special part names. So in my one, it's tube splice generic. And then we can actually go and have a look at that part to see how it's orientated, how it's set up, and then we can mimic that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go open. I'm going to go to my C drive. Now all of that data is stored in a folder called program data. Now if we have a look at my computer here, I go into the C drive. I can see program data. It could be the case on your machine you can't actually see that, and that is because that is a hidden folder. What you need to do in Windows is go to View, and you need to say show me hidden items. If I untick it, we'll see that we can't see program data. So we just need to tick that to show it. So we go into program data, into Autodesk, into the Advanced Steel version that you're running. So I'm running 2024. And then into the build. So I am running the UK build, so that's the GBR folder. The next folder is then shared, support, and then all the special parts that the PowerPack uses are stored in the symbols folder. So we can see here are all the key clamp parts. Now my one was called tube generic, so if we go down to T, tube splice generic. So what I'm going to do, we're going to open that file. So what we can see, my advice for setting up your special parts is when you open up a file, just set the UCS to world, make sure it's set to world. Now we can see for this one that the tube is following the x-axis and the special part is placed in, or the middle of the special part is at 0, 0. So in a Blue Peter style, here is one I created earlier. So we can see my x-axis is following where the tube will be, and my special part is orientated, the center of the special part, or the middle of the special part is orientated at the UCS. So this is what I'm going to add into the macro. So don't need that. So what we do is we go back to the Special Part Manager. We come to the pipe-to-pipe connection and we click the Add button. We then want to go and find the special part. So we have to click the 3 little dots and then we have to go to where we have saved the special part. So that's where I've saved it. And I'm just going to copy the file name as well. And I'll show you why we've done that. So we're going to load that into the macro. Now the name, this is what we'll show in the macro dialog. So I don't actually need the internal splice, but I want the tube size and I want the code number. And then what we must do is we must hit save. And then we can close the dialog down. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a couple of breaks in our railing macro here. So I'm using the PowerPack railing tools. And what we're going to go and do is we are going to go to, just going to up our post spacings to say 400. And then we're going to come to the handrails, and we have a split mechanism. So I'm going to say I want to split based on post positions. And we can say, okay, post number 1, 2, 3. I want to split it somewhere in here. So post number 4, I want to split the top rail. And you can see that's put a split in. And I want to move it, say, 200 mil backwards. So I've got my split. So that was post number 4, number 5, 6, 7, and number 8. So number 8, I want to split it. And I want a 200 mil gap. Now, because this is all welded, I actually want to do the same with the middle rails as well. So it's number 4 minus 200 and number 8 and 200. Now that should give me within the macro, if we have a look, this is still all done with one macro, but now I've got my railings split. Now what we can do is we can come in, and in the PowerPack connection vault we have within our beam to beam tab we have a tube to tube connection. So I can choose my first tube, right click, enter or spacebar, choose my second tube, and that will start to put a welded internal splice. But in here I can say I want to do it from a special part, and now we can see here is the special part I added to the macro. We can see it's orientated correctly because I set it up correctly, and here's my option from the list. And then what I can do is I can say, okay, I want a 20 mil gap in the tubes. And then what we're going to actually set here is we are going to set our connection type to all welded. Didn't like all welded, so we will say spot welded then. And then what I will do is for my welds, I will say no, I don't want any welds. So the tube, the part isn't welded to anything. Now what I can do is we could then look to save this in the library, so that on the next job we can just load it in direct from the library. So we can import those values. And then we want to give it a decent name. So what we will do is we could call it the same code number. That will save all my settings in here. And then we can come in and say, okay, well down here we want it to use that library, which it is. Now what we can also do, because it's a joint, we can then say, okay, we want to copy the joint and we want to put it into a group. And that means that we have our joints copied round, nothing is welded. If we have a look, we should see that that's not welded, but we now have our special part in the model via the PowerPack macros. So a couple more tips and tricks to get through. The next one is using the railing macro and having the option for no top rail. So with the PowerPack stairs and railing, standard railing, it's possible for us to turn the top rail off. So it means you can model glass infills with no top rail, or we can put in double mid rails if we want to. So in the handrail section, you've got the option here for create handrail, and we obviously just untick that option. Okay, we're going to look at a couple of things within the PowerPack stair tools. So we're just going to put some, we're going to do it based on points. So we're just going to, don't need to connect to anything, not going to provide post base points, not going to select a nosing point. And we are going to turn off our middle handrail. And we're just going to set the post positioning to be by total length. And we are going to turn on our panels. Now the one thing we can do is with the handrails, we have this option here. Do we even want to create the handrail? So if we don't, we can actually turn off our handrail completely. So short and sharp one there. A couple more to go. So the next one is looking at section preferences for the PowerPack macros. So in the stairs and railings, for example, when you click the drop down, there are lots of sections that we wouldn't use to create stairs and railings. What we can do is create a new profile in the management tools and then look to customize our preferences, and then we can load this profile via the project settings.
So we're going to have a look at our preferred sizes. So when we're using these GreyTech macros, if I go into the standard rail that we create, I don't need you guys to do this. In fact, for this, you can down tools. This is just something for you to be aware of. If you use these macros more and more and more, you'll see in here that we have all of these sections showing in here in the drop down. Now, we're never going to create railings with kingspan and things like that. We're probably going to use flats, rounds, tubes, maybe angles, the standard sort of stuff. Now, the reason the system uses that is the system is looking in our management tools, and there's part of the system called preferred sizes. I did this with the stairs training, but for those of you that might have missed the stairs training, I'm going to repeat it in here. And in here we have a standard profile. So if I look at beams, I have section groups, and in here these are the groups that I can see in here. So I've got Adam G. Brown, Ayrshire, Airwell, Kingspan, a couple of Kingspans, Metsex in there, Tegrals. That's why they're shown in the list. And then that is the group. Within each class, I've then got all the different classes showing. So what we need to do, we need to duplicate the profile. So I'm going to call this PowerPack. Maybe we could call it PowerPack Stairs, for example. Make sure that we're actually on the PowerPack Stairs, and I'll hit the Apply button. Then I'm going to go Section Groups, and I am going to get rid of the sections that I don't want to see in here. We'll keep square bars in, we'll keep I-bars in, I-beams in, I-sections. So we'll move all of those out. So I'm going to remove all of those. Now what I need to do to get this to work properly is, of those classes that I removed, I then from the group, I then need to go into each class and say, right, I removed the Adam G brand, so I can do a Control-A. I need to remove the individual classes as well, so I just need to work through the list. I'll just show you the first couple. You don't need to see me do all of these, but I would go to Albion sections and I would remove those from the list and then hit the apply button. The other thing that we could do in here, so I've cleared out all the individual bits and pieces. If we're modeling things like flat, you'll see the preferred classes is set to flat. So what I can then do is I can go down another level and I can go to sections, because we might have lots of flats in the list, but not the ones that we want to work with. Because if I go to flat, you'll see that these are all the flats in my preferred sizes, which is a lot of them, and I don't need all of those. We'll just, for today's example, there's quite a lot of flat bars, isn't there? This isn't always the easiest to find, but we'll just put in that's 400, so I'm looking, I can't see the wood for the trees. We've got 40 by 10, 40 by 12. We'll do the same, we'll find the 50s. 50 by 8 probably. This is something that you guys can sort of, you don't have to do it all at once, you can just build it over time. There's 50 by 10. We'll just leave it like that for now. So I'll apply that. So you have to do the groups and show only the groups you want. Then you need to go into the classes and make sure that the classes are filtered out. Then I can go into my project settings. I'll come back to my model and go preferences. And then I can say, right, show me PowerPack stairs. If we then go into the, let's say, the standard rail, if we then go to the handrails, for example, you can see that I've now just got what, I must have missed a few of them, but that list is a lot shorter than it was. If we, let's go middle handrail, which was flat, and you'll see now I've only got 40, 10, 40, 12, 50 by 8, 50 by 10, and then I've got to go to all to scroll through the list. So over time, this is something that you guys can manipulate and grow to help you with your drop-down lists.
And the final tip we're going to look at is the PowerPack Help page. So the help portal was updated with the 2024 PowerPack. You access it from your ribbon, you see the Learn little drop down, and you've got Help. And what that will do is that will take you to our new online help portal. The final tip we'll look at thing I want to highlight to everyone is the PowerPack Help. Now this has had a huge amount of work done to it over the last 12 months. So if we click we're in the PowerPack tab, if we click the Learn drop down and go Help, you'll see that it's all been updated. There's tabs on installation and licensing. If we look at the ribbon, we can see that we have it broken down into create elements, create macros, fabricate, and manage. So if we said create macros panel, we can drill down right into everything, even concrete stairs that was added in the 2024 PowerPack, and now we have a comprehensive help on what needs to be done to set up these macros, what everything does, and how everything works. So a huge amount of work has gone into this help section, obviously, to make using the PowerPack as easy as possible for you guys. I will put a link in the question and answer section, or in the chat. I'll highlight a link to everyone as well. And that takes us to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for joining. What I will do is I will keep the session running to answer any questions that have come in.